What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Musari Show. So funny enough, today we're expecting to have a guest, a special guest, so that's been postponed. So I thought I'd just talk about the hot topic, which everybody's talking about worldwide, which is the tariffs and the impact that it's having on the stock market, right? A couple of episodes ago, I think I did share some of my thoughts around the whole thing, and I kind of maintain the same thoughts. So I thought I'd just share some interesting facts. Right. So from the get-go, my position has always been that, the tariffs were used as a negotiation tool, right? So I've been getting a lot of questions from people, including people outside the United States, asking about my thoughts, right? And it's funny how obviously a lot of people who live outside the United States have either come here to visit, or they've come here, or they like seeing America on TV, right? And many times when they come to visit, they tour around the bigger cities. They go to like New York, they go to Miami, they go to Chicago, Boston, you name it, Houston in Texas, and LA, Las Vegas, the touristy kind of towns, right? But when you're familiar with that side of America, it doesn't give you a bigger picture. It doesn't give you a full picture of what's really happening in the country. Because I am someone who's lived a couple of years of my childhood in the Midwest, right? Specifically referring to Iowa and Illinois. And on one hand, when you look at the composition of America's economy, I did see a graph once, and it compared America's manufacturing output to a country like China. I think America sat at like $2.9 trillion, and China was a bit north of $4 trillion. So, given that America's nominal GDP is sitting at about $29 trillion, I believe about 10% of that is manufacturing output, and I believe when you look at China's nominal GDP, the $4+ trillion has a higher share of their GDP. So manufacturing is a higher percentage of it, right? And over the decades, we've seen that manufacturing has contributed to GDP growth. But before we get into facts, please wanted to remind you all to hit the subscribe button if you're watching from YouTube, and also drop a comment and a like. And if you are listening from Spotify, please be sure to drop us 5-star rating and also drop a comment, right? So here's one of the root issues that is driving Trump's concerns, right? So this here is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics from the United States, right? That's the source of the data in this graph. And it shows graphically the decline of manufacturing jobs in the United States, right? So we see that this started around the early 2000s, and I believe it was around 2000-ish when China joined the World Trade Organization, right? So U.S. manufacturing jobs were sitting at plus minus 16 million. And this is a country with a population, I believe at the time already had over 200 million people. So it's a sizable share of the population. And we've seen that because of, the trade deals that were signed by previous presidents like Nixon and President Clinton. The intent of the U.S. was to outsource the manufacturing jobs to foreign countries due to cheaper labor. And they believe that would translate to, the U.S. economy getting access to like cheaper products for consumption, right? However, over time, we've seen that a lot of these economies have turned into monsters. You look at, for example, Vietnam, you look at China, and what happens is, in practice, if you're like a manufacturing hub, you're going to be receiving a lot of designs for these products, whether it's textile products, whether it's technological products, electronics, vehicles, whatever. You're going to get the best designs in the world coming at you all the time. So that's going to be an opportunity for you to take it, identify gaps and rooms for improvement, and improve. And you're going to be a specialist in manufacturing at global level, right? So what happens is, that's going to be a competitive advantage. If you have a government that is strategic in their thinking, they're going to take that and leverage on that to become a dominant player in global trade. And that's exactly what's happened with China. They're a very dominant player when it comes to trade of manufactured products. So we've seen that the manufacturing jobs have declined. In 2008, there was, the economic crisis, and, the market did crash quite a bit. That caused a sharper decline. And this was around the time when President Obama stepped in, right? To his credit, we have seen that the government did decide to bail out, and eventually there was a steady recovery of the economy. And with that, we did see a recovery of employment, right? Now, President Obama stepped out exactly in January 2017 after President Trump won the elections in 2016. Therefore, when he came in, he also did have a protectionist policy. We did see that the line was sort of straight over here, then it bumped a little bit more, right? And eventually, this statistic dipped quite sharply during the COVID-19 pandemic. And when markets opened, things began to recover. Under the Biden administration, we did see the Chips and Science Act, which did open doors to manufacturing jobs and chips somehow, and that did cause an increase. And here we are in this situation. But overall, when you look at the output of manufacturing, it's not too great. Now, why do I believe that the president is doing this, right? So there are two separate things. First, we did see the whole tariff situation around like January, February with Canada and Mexico in particular. The tariffs were used at that time specifically as a negotiation tool with border issues because the US government does spend billions of dollars to control the border, and a lot of the illegal immigrants statistically have been coming in through the borders with Canada and mostly through the borders with Mexico. There was also the fentanyl issue, right? So if illegal immigrants are coming to the country because of gaps in controls of your country, you got to also pay the bill and contribute with the cost of like controlling the borders. So we saw that the president of Mexico sent a troop of like 10,000 to control the southern border, and Prime Minister Trudeau at the time did also contribute to controlling the north border with Canada. But this situation is kind of different because this here has to do with the trade balance of the United States, right? Because the US is pretty much a net importer. So you have like a massive economy. In nominal GDP terms, America is the biggest economy in the world. So when you look at the composition, manufacturing is a very small percentage, maybe like 10-ish% of the whole thing. But you find that it's a very strong service-driven and consumption-driven economy. When you look at the reliance, for example, of critical minerals, America is very reliant on Canada, China, as well as Africa. And when it comes to manufactured goods, there's very high reliance in so many different countries, right? And historically, it has been proven that a lot of countries have been tariffing the United States, but the United States doesn't tariff back. So one thing that's kind of interesting is that a lot of people kind of like accuse Trump of being like Elon's puppet, but there is very strong evidence that these tariffs are really President Trump's conviction, right? So I'm going to play a very short clip, and this is President Donald Trump in 1988, before he even dreamed or even thought of being president, and this was on Oprah, and he was sharing his thoughts on the whole trade situation of the United States. Check this out.
I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not.
You've said, though, that if you did run for president, you believe you'd win.
Well, I don't know. I think I'd win. I tell you what, I wouldn't go in to lose. I've never gone in to lose in my life.
If you pick me, you're going to pick a winner.
We let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade.
I want free trade, but I want it to be like, at least we break even, right? We do something.
If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Elton. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies.
Japan, they send cars by the millions. They come off those boats.
Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
Why didn't we say we want 50% of your oil forever, or we're not letting you go back in?
So this is something that's been bothering over some time. So obviously we can see that the intent is to kind of like restructure, renegotiate the trade terms, right? Such that, both countries don't tariff each other, and he wants to push towards a country of free trade. Now, something that really got my attention, obviously, if you are someone that supports this administration or not, you have the right to be kind of nervous, right? Because, you look at Dow Jones, right? For the past month, Dow Jones been down 12%, and there was another dip today. You look at S&P 500, it's been down 13.57% the past month. You look at Bitcoin, it's been down 10%. So if you're someone that has been holding on to this, you're making some unrealized losses. And obviously those losses are going to become realized if you really cash it out. Something that really got my attention yesterday was that, over 50 countries have been seeking to negotiate with the Trump administration. So this is something that really gave me comfort, right? So, what negotiations are we referring to? As we can see here in this picture, President Trump is holding here a chart of reciprocal tariffs. It's sort of like a table where he shows the name of the country, the tariffs that they're allegedly charging, and the tariff that he's proposing towards the country, which is a discount of that, right? So, when I first saw this, which when I think it was like last week, Wednesday, the thing that got my attention was the whole currency manipulation note. So I thought maybe due to like currency changes, they were like including or like inflating the tariff number. But it turned out that like when I listened to a lot of pundits, the consensus seems to be that they took the trade deficit and they divided it by the amount of goods that the U.S. is exporting to them, and that's how they came out with these percentages. So this is really a trade deficit calculation, and I think it wasn't accurately explained to be quite accurate, right? But it doesn't negate the fact that the intent of this is to remove tariffs on both ends so that we can go towards a world of free trade. He wants to avoid a situation where America's buying products, but the other countries tariffing a lot. I think I have seen a chart, for example, where Canada is like tariffing American butter and cheese over 200%. But meanwhile, in America, the country, consumes a lot of product from those countries, right? So, so here it seems like 50 countries have been reaching out to them. Since then, we have been seeing countries such as Israel, I believe India, Taiwan, Vietnam, Cambodia, funny enough, Zimbabwe, speaking up and saying that they're willing to sit down and negotiate with the president, right? And I believe Japan might have also come to the party. I'm not too sure, but there are other countries coming to the party. So this is the what. So the next question would be like, so what? So what's the way forward, right? So here's my thing. I think, obviously, this is a situation where one has a right to be nervous as a consumer. However, in any panicking situation, it's always best to keep a cool head. When I look back at COVID, there was a lot of panic and anxiety worldwide, due to the whole anxiety of possibly getting the disease and markets being closed because of it. However, when I look back, I really regret not buying stocks when they were so cheap, right? Because I remember like months later, people were like making 100+% gains because they bought S&P indexes and stocks at such cheap prices, right? But at the same time, I do acknowledge that due to the stimulus package, there is a bigger supply of money in the market. People have more cash to like invest in the stock market, and that also did cause stock prices to spike up. And then when markets opened, stock prices was just roaring, and I just regret it so badly. So I do foresee that we're going to be seeing a lot of negotiations happening. I do believe that that's possibly going to drive the president to kind of like remove the tariffs to kind of reset the thing, as countries also do reset it. I do believe that there will be a select few rivals of the United States that are going to really be tougher to negotiate with, and they're probably going to also demand conditions in the United States. But in general, I would say, to be honest, I'm probably like 60 to 65% confident that the US's strategy is going to work, right? So a lot of people argue and say, okay, but if you do that, if you boost manufacturing in the United States, you're going to have very high labor costs, right? So funny enough, today I did send somebody a picture of Tesla's manufacturing plant. AI and robotics is already a reality. And America and China are countries with very strong AI and robotic capabilities. I think they're going to be leading that race. And, we're going to be entering the area of dark manufacturing, right? There's going to be less people in the process, and there's going to be more machines. So I do believe that going forward, labor costs are not going to be a major issue. I think this is a major opportunity to kind of like change, the fabric of the U.S. economy. And I'm gonna also share one very interesting statistic here, right? So ever since President Trump became president, he has attracted over $3 trillion of investment, $1.4 trillion from UAE, I believe, $600 billion coming from Saudi Arabia in the form of purchased goods. I believe Japan was like over $100 billion. The likes of Apple were committing to like build plants of like $500 billion rather. So the people who are investing in this do know what his policies were. I think the world shouldn't be surprised that Trump came with these tariffs. He did campaign on it, and he does generally have a reputation of doing what he said he's going to do. So, anyways, he is doing what he campaigned on. I think if anybody is extremely upset about it, okay, I mean, obviously, this is a democratic country. People do have the right to be happy and not be happy with whatever's coming out of the White House, but he did campaign on this, and this shouldn't be a surprise. So, obviously, if you're American or if you live in America, you want to wish that, the administration is successful, because their success is everybody else's success, regardless of where they stand. And I do believe that there will be a positive outcome. So, anyways, thanks so much for joining. This is not investment advice. I personally do think it's an opportunity to time things well and buy cheap stocks at this moment. And, only God knows by when this whole thing will be over, and eventually the markets will bounce back and it'll be a great opportunity to make some handsome gains. So anyways, thank you so much for joining this episode, and see you next week.